We often think of illness as something that happens to us, a malfunction, a random defect, an unfortunate interruption in the flow of our lives. But what if it's not? What if illness is not just a biological breakdown, but a message? What if pain is the universe speaking a language we've forgotten how to hear? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Illness is often the body's way of making the unconscious conscious. It whispers at first, then it speaks, then it screams, and if we're not listening, it doesn't stop, because the message hasn't been received. We live in a culture obsessed with avoiding discomfort. We silence symptoms, suppress pain, deny fatigue, and numb emotion. But nothing truly disappears when we ignore it. It just finds a new way to speak. The universe, through your body, through your soul, is always trying to realign you with truth. And when everything else fails, it speaks through illness. This isn't about blame. It's not about saying you caused your pain. It's about learning to listen, to decode the signals, to see the body not as separate from the soul, but as its most honest translator. Let's begin where it often starts, the head. Chronic headaches, migraines, pressure behind the eyes or in the temples. On the surface, we say it's stress, tension, maybe dehydration. But what if the pain in your head isn't just about physical strain? What if it's mental overload from carrying too many thoughts that aren't even yours? What if your mind is overloaded with shoulds and musts that suppress your intuition? Head pain often arises when we live in contradiction, when our rational mind dominates while our deeper knowing is ignored, when we're addicted to thinking but starved of feeling. Jung believed the psyche seeks balance. If one part is overactive, another suffers. In this case, the intellect becomes tyrannical and the body rebels. Now think about the throat. Sore throats, chronic coughing, loss of voice. This is the center of expression, the energetic gateway between your inner truth and the outer world. When we consistently silence ourselves, avoid confrontation, or pretend to be fine when we are not, the throat responds. It's as if your body says, "If you won't speak your truth, I will show you what it feels like to be silenced." Many people who experience recurrent throat issues are people pleasers. They suppress their opinions to maintain peace. They swallow emotions to avoid rejection. But your soul was never meant to be voiceless. When expression is blocked, inflammation rises. Your pain becomes the voice you were afraid to use. Let's move lower, the heart. Not just the organ, but the emotional center. Tightness in the chest, palpitations, unexplained heart pain. These are not always medical emergencies, but sometimes spiritual ones. The heart suffers when we close ourselves off from love. When we grieve and never fully allow the grief to move. When we fear intimacy or guard ourselves too long. The physical heart is deeply sensitive to emotional constriction. Old heartbreaks don't disappear. They live in the tissues. Jung understood this through the idea of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we disown. And love, when rejected or lost, can become part of that shadow. Buried emotion, when not given space to move, solidifies. It shows up as pressure, irregular rhythms, or even numbness in the chest. Then there's the stomach and gut, places we feel before we think. Nausea, bloating, indigestion, ulcers. This is where anxiety settles when it has nowhere else to go. When your body can't digest a situation, your stomach mirrors that conflict. People who live in constant fear or who carry hidden resentment often experience chronic stomach tension. The gut is your second brain. It responds faster than logic, often holding trauma long before the mind catches up. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly felt sick for no reason? That's your gut sensing what your conscious mind hasn't yet processed. Ignoring that signal is like ignoring a compass during a storm. Back pain is another common manifestation, specifically the lower back, which often represents the feeling of not being supported by others, by life, or even by yourself. How many times have you said, "I carry everything on my back"? Sometimes your body takes that literally. You carry the weight of your family, your responsibilities, your silence, and then your back buckles, not out of weakness, but because it can no longer sustain what your heart refuses to set down. Neck pain has its own message: inflexibility, a refusal to see from another angle, holding on to pride, to control, to past hurt. The neck is what turns the head. When it's stiff, it often signals that you're stuck in one way of thinking, unwilling or afraid to look at things differently. Skin issues, like rashes or chronic irritation, often speak of boundaries. The skin is our first line of contact with the world. When you feel exposed, judged, or under pressure to hide who you are, the skin can flare. It's the body's way of saying, "I don't feel safe being seen." Leg pain or heaviness often points to fear of moving forward, feeling directionless, stuck, or afraid to step into a new phase of life. The legs are your mobility. When they feel weak, it may not be a matter of muscle, but a matter of purpose. The soul hesitates, and the body responds in kind. And then there's the unspoken pain, the fatigue, the autoimmune flare-ups, the diagnosis you didn't expect. These aren't random punishments. They're profound moments of reflection, of pause, of redirection. The universe is not cruel, but it is relentless when it's trying to wake you up. When your life path veers too far from your truth, your soul doesn't just whisper, it triggers the body to intervene. Because you wouldn't listen to intuition, because you ignored signs. So the signs became symptoms and then diagnoses. And sometimes rock bottom is not destruction, it's intervention. Jung's work reminds us that the psyche and soma, the soul and the body, are not two. They reflect one another constantly. And illness in this framework is not just a failure of health, it is an opportunity to integrate what has been fragmented, to become whole again, to listen, really listen to what you've long silenced. So the next time your body hurts, before you numb it, distract it, or push it aside, pause. Ask yourself, what is not being said in my life? What have I refused to feel? What has been out of alignment for far too long? What truth have I abandoned to survive? The body doesn't betray you, it reveals you. And if you dare to listen, it will tell you exactly where you've gone silent. Because pain is often the language of the universe when we stop speaking our own. Most people don't ignore their pain because they want to. They ignore it because they've been taught to. From a young age, we're told to be strong, to keep going, to not make a fuss. We are conditioned to associate rest with weakness, vulnerability with shame, and silence with strength. So we learn to cope by suppressing, to endure instead of heal, to survive instead of understand. And the body, patient but persistent, keeps speaking in the only way it knows how, through symptoms. When we experience illness, we're trained to think something has gone wrong. But what if something is trying to go right? What if the illness is not the enemy, but the beginning of alignment? Carl Jung spoke often of the soul's need to express itself. When it's denied, when we live too long in masks and expectations, the psyche finds ways to be heard. Sometimes through dreams, sometimes through emotions, and sometimes, when everything else fails, through the body. It's not that the body betrays us, it's that the body becomes the messenger when the soul's voice is no longer welcome. This is why so many people fall physically ill after prolonged emotional repression. Unprocessed grief, anger that was never allowed, lives spent living for others. The immune system responds not just to viruses, but to loneliness. The heart suffers not just from cholesterol, but from chronic heartbreak. The nervous system collapses not just from noise, but from unacknowledged fear. We don't get sick in isolation from our inner world. We get sick because of our disconnection from it. Take, for example, the person who has spent years pleasing others, constantly putting their needs last, saying yes when they want to scream no. Over time, they develop chronic fatigue. No energy, no drive. The doctors say, we can't find anything physically wrong. But the soul knows. The soul is exhausted from being ignored. Fatigue is often not just about rest, it's about meaning. If your life has no room for your own truth, your body will slowly start to shut down, not because it's defective, but because it's done carrying what's not aligned. Or think of the person who carries unresolved guilt, maybe for something they did, maybe for something they didn't do. That guilt festers, often unspoken, and manifests in digestive issues. The gut, remember, is a center of emotional processing. I can't stomach this. It makes me sick. These phrases aren't just figures of speech. They're the body's way of interpreting emotional truths. Carl Jung would likely call this a split between the persona and the shadow. The persona is the face we wear in public, the one that conforms, performs, adapts. The shadow is everything we've pushed down, disowned, or feared. And the more the persona dominates, the louder the shadow becomes. When we ignore the shadow, we don't get rid of it. We somatize it. This is the quiet tragedy of modern life. We are more connected than ever, yet more disconnected from ourselves. We have endless access to information, but very little access to meaning. We rush to fix symptoms without ever asking what the symptom is trying to show us. We numb pain instead of decoding it. And in doing so, we silence the very guidance the universe is trying to give. But this guidance is always available. The question is, are we willing to feel it? Your body has always been in communication with you. Every tension, every ache, every flare-up is part of a larger conversation. A dialogue between your inner world and your outer experience. If you trace your symptoms back, not just through physical timelines, but emotional ones, you'll often find clarity. Think about this. When did your chronic migraine start? Was it after that job you took that never felt right? When did your heart palpitations begin? Was it after a loss you never fully grieved? When did your autoimmune symptoms appear? Was it around the time you stopped expressing who you really are? The timing isn't coincidental. The body doesn't lie. Even when the mind is in denial, the body continues to speak. And illness is often not the collapse. It's the breakthrough. It's the moment something deeper demands to be seen. There's a reason some people start healing the moment they speak their truth. There's a reason certain illnesses ease when toxic relationships end. There's a reason suppressed artists get sick when they stop creating and heal when they pick up the brush again. The body responds to truth, and the universe never stops pushing you toward it. This is not to say that illness is always symbolic. There are biological realities, environmental factors, genetic conditions. But even within those, meaning can still be found. A diagnosis is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a deeper one. So what can you do with this awareness? First, you begin by listening. Not with panic, but with presence. When something hurts, ask not just, how do I stop this, but what is this trying to tell me? Be curious about your pain. Trace it. Explore it. Let your symptoms become signposts. Second, look at the timing. What shifted emotionally before the body began to react? What truth was avoided? What fear was buried? What decision was delayed? The answers may not be immediate, but if you keep asking, they will come. Third, learn to speak your body's language. When your throat tightens, ask, what am I afraid to say? When your chest aches, ask, where am I holding grief? When your stomach churns, ask, what can I no longer digest? These are not poetic questions, they are survival questions. Carl Jung believed that wholeness comes not from perfection, but from integration, from bringing together all the parts of ourselves we have scattered or denied. And often, the body is the very thing that leads us there. You do not need to be perfect to heal, you need to be honest. The body is incredibly intelligent. It doesn't break easily, it adapts, compensates, endures, but when it does finally speak an illness, it's because something has gone too long unacknowledged, not just physically but spiritually. Your soul is trying to reach you through discomfort, through disruption, through disease. This is how the universe speaks when every other whisper has been ignored. And the beautiful truth is, the moment you start to listen, not with fear, but with compassion, something inside you softens. The war inside you calms. The illness may still be there, but it no longer feels like punishment. It feels like part of the path, because the goal is not just to feel better, it's to understand better. And through that understanding, something in you begins to realign. Not just your health, but your life. What if the greatest breakthrough in your life is hidden inside the pain you've spent years avoiding? What if the body wasn't just failing, but waking you up? By the time we truly feel illness, the message has been trying to reach us for much longer than we realize. A whisper in the gut, a tightness in the chest, a wave of fatigue when we pretend we're fine. These were the early signals, but we've been taught to fear pain, to mute it, to fight it. Rarely do we pause and ask, what if this is sacred? What if my body is not broken, but honest? Carl Jung believed that healing isn't about chasing an ideal state of wellness. It's about integration, becoming whole again by acknowledging all that we are: the conscious, the unconscious, the shadow, the light. And sometimes the only way we finally turn inward is when everything on the outside breaks down. Illness does that. It brings us to the edge of control. It dismantles illusions. It forces us into silence. And in that silence, something begins to speak. Not the mind, not the ego, but the soul. The soul that has waited patiently for us to stop running. You see, the body is not separate from your emotional life. It is shaped by it, molded by every suppressed truth, every swallowed scream, every moment you said, "I'm fine," while dying inside. And yet, it's not punishing you. It's carrying you, carrying what your mind couldn't handle, carrying what your voice couldn't say, carrying the grief, the trauma, the longing you never gave space to feel. And when it can no longer carry it quietly, it hurts. But even in the hurting, it's still trying to guide you home. This is how the universe speaks, not with thunder, not with lightning, but through the language of what you feel. Pain is not the punishment. It's the call. Illness is not the ending. It's the invitation. So ask yourself now, gently, what is your body trying to say? If your throat is always tight, whose truth have you been silencing? If your stomach burns, what in your life can you no longer digest? If your chest aches, what grief still sits unspoken in your heart? If your skin flares, where do you feel exposed, unprotected, vulnerable? If your back is always in pain, what burdens have you made yourself carry alone? These questions are not medical diagnoses. They are emotional doorways. They are how you begin to listen again, not just to symptoms, but to soul. And yes, real healing involves more than awareness. It may involve therapy, rest, saying no, letting go, starting over. Sometimes it involves medicine and science, but even that is part of listening. Choosing to care for yourself from a place of presence, not panic. Healing is not a destination. It's a relationship, a new way of relating to your pain, a new kind of honesty with yourself, a new commitment to no longer abandoning the parts of you that are inconvenient, uncomfortable, or misunderstood. Because the truth is, your body never lied to you, not once. It told the truth when your voice wouldn't. It reacted when your boundaries were crossed. It shook when your soul was afraid. It broke down not to destroy you, but to stop you from continuing to live in ways that were already doing so. Jung often described the process of individuation as a descent, a moving inward, a confrontation with what we've ignored. It is not always graceful. It is not painless, but it is necessary. And often the body leads us there faster than the intellect ever could. When illness strikes, it may feel like life is collapsing, but sometimes what's collapsing is the illusion, the false self, the unsustainable life, the mask you've worn for too long. And what emerges in its place, if you allow it, is truth, realignment, peace, not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the peace that comes from finally being real. And that is the medicine your soul has been asking for. So many people try to return to normal after illness, but what if normal was the problem? What if your symptoms were never meant to be silenced, but heard? What if your body's breakdown was the breakthrough you never knew you needed? You don't have to go back. You're not meant to. You're meant to go forward, wiser, slower, more awake. You're meant to live differently, speak more truthfully, rest more honestly, feel more fully. Because once you truly hear your body, once you truly listen to what your pain is trying to show you, your life will change. You'll stop tolerating what drains you. You'll stop pleasing those who never see you. You'll stop betraying yourself for belonging. You'll stop pretending everything is okay when it's not. And you'll start honoring the signals. You'll rest when you're tired. You'll cry when you're grieving. You'll speak when it hurts to stay silent. You'll say no without guilt. You'll walk away without needing permission. Not because you're healed, but because you're healing. And healing means you no longer treat your body as an obstacle. You treat it as a guide. That is what the universe has wanted all along, for you to remember that the body is sacred, that pain is information, that you are allowed to feel, to pause, to change. Your illness may not vanish overnight, but your relationship to it will transform from fear to curiosity, from resentment to reverence, from resistance to listening. And in that shift, everything begins to open, because when you listen to your body, you begin to hear the voice beneath it, the voice of your soul. And the soul has never wanted to hurt you. It only wanted you to come home. If these words resonated with something you've been carrying in silence, you're not alone. Share your thoughts, your stories, your reflections in the comments. Sometimes giving voice to your experience is the first step toward release. And if this message helped you look at your pain differently, please consider leaving a like. It helps these ideas reach those who need them most. For more content on Jungian wisdom, emotional healing, and the deeper language of the soul, subscribe and join the journey inward. Your body has always been speaking. This is your invitation to finally listen.